Hello everyone, my name is Primacon, and do you ever find yourself wondering, man, I want to get into the Souls series. There's this brand new game, Elden Ring, it's popping off, I don't know if it's for me or not, but then there's the hardliners who will live and die by the fact that Dark Souls 3 is the best video game ever made. Maybe you're intimidated by the sheer scope of Elden Ring, but also scared to try Dark Souls 3 because of the infamous difficulty. In this video, I hope to clear up a little bit of confusion and maybe help you pick for yourself which game should you try first. Because trust me, if you end up liking one of these games, I'm pretty sure you'll like both. Elden Ring was my first Souls game ever played. On Steam alone, I have over 100 hours on the game, but then I got it on the PlayStation because the PC performance was kind of very janky. And then on my PlayStation, I have another 250-ish hours clocked in. So about 350 hours in Elden Ring total. I'm pretty new to Dark Souls. So far, I've put 10 solid hours into the game. I'm playing it for the first time on my channel, and I have reached one of the core bosses called the Abyss Watchers. You can check my Dark Souls series out, I'll link it in the description, but I've played enough to have a good understanding of what makes Elden Ring and Dark Souls so separate from each other. Both those games are vastly different, way more different than I thought they would be. Now the thing is, there's no right or wrong. Like I said, they're just different. So I hope to present to you objective differences between both the games, and then it's up to you and your personal preference on which of the two things you value more. Of course, at the end, I'll give you my recommendation as well. Of course, on a surface level, the biggest main difference between Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring is Elden Ring is a big open world game, whereas Dark Souls 3 is a very linear adventure. In fact, if you hear from the Souls community, Dark Souls 3 is one of the more linear Dark Souls game as well, as Dark Souls 1 is famous for its Metroidvania-like world design where all the areas just kind of feed into each other and connect back into the main hub world. Dark Souls 3 is a much more linear experience than that. But now what does that mean? Let's get the big one out of the way when it comes to Souls series and why you might be on the fence about it. Difficulty. Look, both games are brutally challenging, but in their very own way. One of the core appeals of a Souls game is the boss fights. You must have heard about it all on the internet. Boss fights are the core when it comes to a Souls video game, at least to most people. And when it comes to boss fights and boss design, Dark Souls 3 bosses have nothing on how difficult Elden Ring bosses are. While yes, Dark Souls 3 bosses might attack you really fast, but they're very predictable and easy to dodge once you get a hang of the speed. They also don't do a ton of damage if you're properly playing. However, in Elden Ring, it's not like that at all. The bosses will throw curveballs at you. Some bosses will hold their attack in the air for way too long before striking down, messing up your timing. A lot of bosses in Elden Ring will just straight up one-shot you with some bullshit attack, and no, your armor does not matter. Your armor might as well be cosmetic because they will one-shot you and buttfuck you for making the smallest mistake possible. The boss design is very cool in Elden Ring though. Their moves are flashy, their voice acting is obviously peak, but when it comes to actual good boss design and fairness, I think Dark Souls 3 does bosses better, and Elden Ring bosses are easily way more difficult than Dark Souls bosses, but also not in a fun way. The amount of shit they've had to nerf in just 2 years of Elden Ring being out is actually hilarious, because it was just so bullshit. You can of course summon a spirit ash to help you in Elden Ring. It is one of the biggest core mechanics of the video game, where you can summon like one of the fucking mobs you find in the game as your own helper and do like a 2v1 a boss fight. In fact, some of these bosses in Elden Ring are designed to be fought 2v1. Because what the game will do is it'll throw two bullshit bosses at you at the same time, but instead of one of them attacking while the others stand back and they both alternate between attacks, they just both come at you with no synergy whatsoever, and it can feel totally unfair unless you also have a helper of your own. Now, I beat Elden Ring and its DLC in its entirety without ever using a summon, but that's just me and how I like to play. A lot of new players might find it difficult and frustrating to juggle that balance as well, where you might want the challenge and the achievement of beating a boss alone, but then also you want to use summons for the bosses that require. You'll always find yourself second guessing, am I supposed to be using a summon here? Am I not? If you want to avoid all of that and just fight bosses that are good designed and make you feel good for beating them, Dark Souls 3 is a clear winner there, even though it might be easier. But where I found Dark Souls 3 easier in boss fights, there is one aspect in which Dark Souls 3 is way more challenging than Elden Ring ever could. I don't care how much people cope about it. I've been playing this game for 10 hours. 10 hours into Elden Ring, I was so used to the outside open world that I had no problem navigating through it. But Jesus fucking Christ, the mobs in Dark Souls 3, in the basic levels outside boss fights, they do not fuck around. The encounters are brutal, usually spaced in a very tight corridor, tight path or hallway, because the game is so linear. The game also expects you to do dodge as well as roll and take every combat with a very skillful kind of approach. Elden Ring, not so much. You can just roll through bullshit and run away on your horse whenever you want. That's one plus side of having a big open world, is the open world threats aren't really threats anymore when you can just run away and go to another 10 million areas that are out there for you to explore. Speaking from a pure objective sense, Dark Souls 3 world by design is way more challenging than Elden Ring. That doesn't mean one is better. In Dark Souls, it's offering you a much more linear, difficult, skillful RPG experience, whereas in the other one, it's offering you this massive dark fantasy world to explore on a horse, where you can take challenges as you want and explore the areas as you please. If you value that kind of exploration and sense of adventure, taking things at your own pace, you will prefer Elden Ring's gameplay much more. But if you like that linear, catered gameplay that is handcrafted by the developers and is supposed to be brutally challenging every step of the way, Dark Souls 3 might be more suited to your needs. Of course, with that big massive open world, Elden Ring comes with a lot of fluff and quality of life to go along with it. For example, a dedicated jump button. You can't do that in Dark Souls. You can do this running, jumping thing, but you can't just jump on the spot. Of course, a mount for you to ride around. A whole map, because the world is so massive. Without a map, you would be so lost. Being able to fast travel from checkpoint to checkpoint from anywhere in the world. You just open your map and go to any of your sites of grace that you found before. You don't have to be at a site of grace to fast travel. Whereas in Dark Souls, the bonfires, which are equivalent to the site of grace in Elden Ring, you have to be at a bonfire to travel to another bonfire, unless you use a consumable item called the Homeward Bone. I know that items get replaced with a permanent item later on. My point being, Elden Ring is much more designed that way from the get-go, which is a running theme with both the games. Elden Ring tries to be as open as possible. It gives you a giant map, so many areas, secret dungeons, so many weapons, spells, summons to find, everything you want to do at your own pace. But sometimes you don't want to create your own fun and adventure. You want the game to hand it to you, a challenge that you conquer. Dark Souls 3, I feel, is a much tighter, curated experience, and while yes, it makes for a much shorter adventure than Elden Ring, it is so much more dense and full of substance. Not to say that Elden Ring is empty or hollow or anything, but like, you won't find the same copy-paste catacomb dungeons in Dark Souls that you do in Elden Ring, for example. But that's also something they kind of have to do with the insane size and scope of that world. It has plenty of things for you to see, trust me. I'm 350 hours in. This is a short point, but I know some people will care about it. It is the lore and the storytelling. So far, I've purely focused my points on gameplay, because let's be real, that's why people want to play these games, is the fucking brutal gameplay. But a lot of people love the lore of these games, and if you come here for a good story, Elden Ring's plot is so much more digestible. The game gives you so much information, unlike anything else in the Souls series before that. It just makes you end up caring about the characters that you're doing quests for a lot more. When you defeat a boss that has a big lore revelation, you actually feel that in your chest. Like, holy shit, I know what this demigod stands for. Like Malekith, for example. This was Queen Marika's right-hand dog, pretty much, and I just slayed this bastard that everyone, even demigods, were scared of. Whereas in Dark Souls, it's so cryptic. Unless you watch a Vati video on about it, like explaining the lore to you, you really won't know much about these characters and stuff, what's going on, unless you dig really deep and read all these descriptions and just go super nuts to butts trying to unravel the lore, which I feel like most people don't want to do. Lastly, I want to talk about balance. This is one of those areas where Dark Souls 3 is such a clear winner, it's not even funny. My biggest complaint, and a lot of people's biggest complaint about Elden Ring, is the stupid balancing of the game. It's like Video Game Donkey pointed out in his video. Enemies that are like crazy strong with insane movesets like the Crucible Knights give you less runes, which is like your XP, than fucking idiots who can't even turn. shit one-shots you no matter what. A lot of times you have to balance your own difficulty, because if something poses a challenge, you can always just level up somewhere else, but then when you return to those older areas, you might find yourself two-shotting every boss. Elden Ring is a game that very much demands the players to balance it themselves on how easy or difficult they want the challenge to be. And even if you're trying your hardest to do that, it could be like a chore almost, to get that perfect amount of challenge and sense of progression. Dark Souls 3, you don't have to worry about any of that. The developers have curated the experience for you. All you have to do is fucking dig in your head, get good, and get through the adventure. So keep all these points in mind when you try to make yourself a decision on which experience do you want first. If you find yourself getting overwhelmed too easily, maybe go with Dark Souls. If you hate having to bash your head against the same boss till you beat it to progress, maybe go with Elden Ring. Elden Ring's high difficulties can be way higher than Dark Souls, while the game can also be way easier if you level up a certain way or use summons, whereas Dark Souls 3 provides a more stable experience. Now personally, I played Elden Ring before Dark Souls. Would I go back in time to change that? Probably not. With how insanely challenging the exploration in Dark Souls is, just the overworld stuff, I think I would have given up so fast if I didn't have any kind of Souls experience. The fact that Elden Ring's open world allows you to slowly approach a problem, take it at your own pace, and then run away is its biggest appeal and draw to new players. So my personal recommendation is you try Elden Ring first. In fact, I will also suggest you go to Vati videos. I'll leave the video in the description, but he has a beginner's guide on how to Elden Ring, where he talks about what stats do, how you should level up, how you should progress, because these games can be very complicated if you've never played a Souls game before. There's just so many more resources out there for Elden Ring, and you can really make that game very easy for yourself if you want to. So if you've never played Souls before, I do recommend going into Elden Ring first, regardless of what I've talked about. But if after listening to my points you have made up your mind like, no, this sounds way better than that one, go for it. No one can gatekeep your experience. Souls community is notorious for doing that. They will tell you you're stupid if you're using mage builds. They will tell you you're stupid if you're using dex builds. They will tell you you're stupid if you're using a build that one-shots the enemy because the hammer is too big. Everyone loves to gatekeep. Don't listen to these idiots. Just play what you want to play and however you want to play it. It's your money. You spent it on the game. You have all the right to enjoy it. It's just that also if you use cheese to beat a really difficult boss that some people spent hours and hours upon to beat using skillful weapons, maybe just don't gloat about it on the internet. Win-win for everybody. If you're also wondering why I'm not mentioning other Souls games like Demon Souls, for example, Dark Souls 1 or 2, Bloodborne, it's because they're so much less accessible than these two. Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring are the most accessible, most polished video games out there when it comes to the Souls series. Sekiro is just so different from all the Souls games. Demon Souls Remake is tied down to the PlayStation 5, and again, it's also very different and has a very old school kind of difficulty where basically the game doesn't have checkpoints. You have to beat the whole level all at once. When it comes to Dark Souls 2, I played it a little bit. I found it very clunky. And also the second game in the series, it's like a weird, awkward middle child of Dark Souls 1 and 3. It makes no sense to try that first. Dark Souls 1 is also a good candidate. It's like Dark Souls 3 if it missed all the fucking quality of life improvements that they made over the years. It's just that personally, I haven't played Dark Souls 1 yet myself, so I don't think I'm in a position to talk about it. And Bloodborne, well, just wait for the PC port. That's definitely coming out next month. You'll enjoy Bloodborne on PC way more than the outdated 30 FPS locked PlayStation hellhole. I wanna play Bloodborne! God damn it! Anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening to me yap about these two games that I really love. If you wanna catch me experience Dark Souls 3 for the first time, I'm playing it on my channel. The playlist is in the description and the comments below. Please check it out. Consider subscribing to support what I do. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in a new video. Primacon, signing out.